Good on that.
Just started it.
Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to the March 13th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Jamie Finch and I'll be your chair tonight. Due to the hybrid nature of this meeting, we will have some members attending in person and others by computer or phone. For those attending remotely, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking and raise your hand if you would like to speak. We'll get you involved in the conversation as soon as possible. For those in person, please put your name cards on the side if you would like to speak. And then we probably will have some motions today. So I'll probably do a quick refresher on how we go through that process. It's been a little while since we've done that. And then if there are any topics that I'm not sure, there may be some topics today that we may want to summarize the conversation. So if there's anything that I miss in that, please let me know. I think with that, Stacey, do you want to run us through attendance?
Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Jamie Finch.
Here.
Raj Gapandi. Oh, she was on. All right, we'll check in with her in a minute. Joy Lewis has an excused absence. Ashwin Kanan.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
Janet Wall.
Here.
Dixie Barrett will be late. And Alex Lee Tigner.
Here.
I think then next we will move into minutes. And we have 3 minutes that we are looking for approval on. Are there any comment on the minutes? Nancy?
I'd like to request that we consider item C, the January 31st, 2024 minute approval separately from the other 2 agendas. Or the other 2 minutes.
Yeah. So is your motion, are you making a motion or are you?
I'm just making a request, or else we can handle each one
Stacey, do we
individually.
need to do a motion for this?
We usually just do a kind of a thumbs up on the notes.
And so just to make it clear there, Nancy, do you want to explain why you're making this?
I got a second.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So, and the reason for that is I think the January 31st, 2024 meeting minutes need to be separated from the combined environmental element comments. My fear is the way this is written, it would appear if we approve the minutes, we're also approving the combined environmental element comments. And my preference is not to have both those approved because I don't think we've had a conversation since we originally provided and all the answers hasn't come from the administration in terms of response to our comments. So I have a motion to go with those minutes when we approve them, but I think the other 2, in my opinion, are fine.
Yeah, you want me to just, I sent out a message to the board. Yeah, the intent was not for approval of the environment element. That was sent because we didn't have in record the board comments or track changes version. It was sent only to the board and then viewed up here. So that was confusing. I apologize. That was not the intent for any approval of those. So I think that works well just to separate out.
And I talked to Stacey about it earlier today to make sure that I wasn't doing anything too wrong.
Awesome. And Nancy, do you feel like we need to do anything else to capture this, or do you think that what Stacey had shared is?
I want to make a
satisfactory?
motion so it's in the record so
Okay.
that it does not appear that we are approving this. So that's why I asked if we could move forward and either individually vote on each of the minutes or
Mhm.
combine the first 2 and take a separate motion. on
Yeah,
the third.
absolutely. Okay, so are there any comments on the January 10th or January 25th minutes? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. Are there any comments on the January 31st minutes?
I have,
Yes.
I have a motion that I'd like to propose. I think you've heard the explanation. I'd like to move to remove the combined environmental element comments from the approval of the minutes for January 31st, 2024.
We have a second on the motion.
Second.
The conversation or discussion on that will happen now and then. there's no amendments. So, any comments or
Questions for me on trying to do?
All right, well, then Stacey, could you take us through the poll
Tom,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Raj,
Yes.
Ashwin,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Yeah, and folks on the phone, definitely flag if you're not following the conversation.
Great, well, then the motion passes, so I think then with that, amendment, basically the environmental element comments being separated. Are there any further comments on January 31st minutes? So those will be approved separately as with the addition, I guess, the reduction of the environmental elements. I think next up we have public comment. Do we have any members of the public sign up to comment?
No, we don't have any members of the public that have sent written comments or on the meeting tonight.
All right, well, then we will move into our agenda items. The first one, student request for Issaquah School District Sustainability Policy Letter of Support. Yes.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. My name is Sienna Gold, and I'm a junior at Gibson Neck High School. With me tonight is Zoe Deering, also a student at Gibson Neck. Plus, unable to be here tonight is working with us Issaquah High School representatives Matthew Fisher and Andrew Kim. Together, we make up the Issaquah Sustainability Ambassadors team, a youth-led nonprofit organization with a vision to rapidly advance a sustainable future. Tonight, we would like to speak on our current work and future plans to help the Issaquah School District implement a district-wide sustainability policy, similar to what the Bellevue School District did almost a year ago.
I would like to thank you all for your support and time taken to create and implement an Issaquah Climate Action Plan. This is such an important step in creating a more sustainable and environmentally stable world for us all today and many years in the future. The Issaquah School District spans over a number of cities, including all of Issaquah, parts of Newcastle, Renton, and Sammamish. With over 19,000 students, the Issaquah School District has a very large impact on not only our youth's education, but also community environmental impacts. Because of this, we would like to ask for your support in our initiative to help the school board create a sustainability policy which reflects on these goals stated in the Climate Action Plan. As of now, we have already spoken with both Sammamish and Issaquah's city councils, and they are all excited to engage with us more by beginning to write letters of recommendation addressed to the school board.
In conclusion, we ask that the environmental board construct a letter of recommendation to the Issaquah School District to collaboratively work towards meeting Issaquah's Climate Action Plan by creating linkage between the Issaquah School District and the city through a sustainability policy. Not only would campaigns be more efficient, but they would be more effective and help give a higher chance in achieving sustainable goals set in the Climate Action Plan. We applaud Issaquah as being the first and only LEED Gold certified city in the state of Washington, and we believe that we should not just stop there, but instead continue to try to make Issaquah and the world a greener place. Your help would be much appreciated. Thank you for your time.
Right. They have requested us to take action. Or is anyone here interested in making a motion? And that could be something along the lines of instructing Stacey to prepare a letter in support of.
So moved, as he said. Instructing Stacy to prepare a letter to the Issaquah School Board, asking them to support us in more sustainability initiative.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Right, and now we'll have any discussion or questions from any of the board members.
I have a question or
Yeah.
a comment. So is there any way we could get a school board member on this board to kind of make it more seamless? Or an administration member, like maybe not the superintendent, but someone else that within the school district? I mean, we could request that in the letter, but I don't know if we'd have to go to council and amend our bylaws to allow that to happen. But my request to you, just, can you check?
Yeah, I think there's an avenue. I was having discussions today about a youth advisory board liaison that would sit on the environmental board. We could consider something like that for the school district, like a school district liaison. So if we were to pursue that avenue, they wouldn't necessarily be a voting member, would be a liaison. If we wanted to add a specific seat for a school district employee or board member, we could change the IMC.
I just think that kind of them hearing what we're doing and us being able to talk to them about what they're doing in a regular meeting might be advantageous, but that's just, and we could, if it works, it would be nice to have it included in the letter. We request that you have someone, attend our environmental board meetings and, provide feedback to us. So that there is more grassroots getting together.
And just to be clear, Nancy, before we move on, I'll come next over to you, Raj. But Nancy, do you want to amend your motion to include what you just mentioned?
I want her to figure out if we can do it. for her.
Okay, so we'll wait on.
If we see it doesn't allow it, we can strike it or include it,
We
whichever.
can, I think it's the format, is that just, it's a request or are we actually adding a position? So, yeah, I can explore those different options.
And then Praj, please go ahead.
Hi. So I think it's a great idea what Nancy said. I think that would be really helpful. And then I had a few questions for the Issaquah Sustainability Ambassadors. I think that's a great initiative. I'm really so excited that you guys are doing that. Some specific questions on are you just trying to, get the Issaquah schools to be more involved with the Issaquah city initiatives, including, climate action plan or anything else? Or do you guys have any specific agenda in addition, which you are trying to push through the schools?
Yeah, so with a policy, so the policy is the very first part that we are going to try to get feedback and just overall implementation from the school board. So it starts with a policy, which basically states that they have these goals and they want to be able to reach these goals in this given amount. And after that comes a plan. With the plan, it establishes, okay, these things are priority and these things are going to end up being more long-term. And then following that becomes implementation and actually following through with the plan and making sure that all of the different things that we have included in the policy get accomplished. So it's basically like taking the really strong bits and pieces from both the Issaquah Climate Action Plan and the Sammamish Climate Action Plan, which you guys are the only two cities that have an established climate action plan. But we're also hoping to talk to Renton City Council and also Newcastle City Council, which are also cities included in the Issaquah School District. And if they have any ideas, preferences, if they already have any smaller policies that are not as big as the climate action plans, that we can consider suggesting to the school board that they put those in.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. The other thing I would like to know is, how do you envision actual, the implementation, the administrative implementation of it? What I was getting at was, Issaquah ambassadors, do you guys meet like weekly, bi-weekly, and do you envision maybe trying to meet with the, each school representative or have some meetings with the schools every month or something, to basically communicate and see what the status is, what's needed, and how do we proceed further?
Yeah, similar to what Bellevue did with their team, they ended up having a student group work with the people who were actually writing the policy to do more of the planning implementation stuff. And as far as sustainability ambassadors, we meet weekly with our Issaquah team. And then we have a few other meetings, kind of like less structured, but between the 4 Issaquah ambassadors. And I know Zoe can speak to a little more of how the Bellevue team did some of that meeting and implementation, but that's something similar to what we're hoping for.
Yeah, so Bellevue has kind of what Stacy mentioned earlier with a youth advisory board. So they have representatives from each of the schools. So those are student representatives that really care about sustainability, environmental impacts, anything along those lines. And they will become student leaders and work with not only the district administration as a whole. So we're talking like highest level that we can get to implement the umbrella of every single facility and every single building that is monitored and owned by the Issaquah School District. So it's going to be more universal throughout all the schools rather than just one school does this and everybody else kind of is like, okay, we can do that in a few years. The goal is to try to get everybody on the same page and everybody to start working towards having more sustainable facilities and then also having better sustainability and environmentally related education and just overall better youth engagement in these topics.
Yeah, that's great. Just one comment, and I think you might know this. I don't know if City of Issaquah has a youth board, but Sammamish has a youth board. But that includes not just Issaquah School District. I believe that includes the Lake Washington as well. But I do know that they also have a sustainability commission, and some of the work is pushed through the youth board as well. If you want to consider, talking to them in case you're talking to the Sammamish City Council. That's all. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on Nancy's motion? Anne, go ahead.
I just want to say, yes, I support Nancy's motion, and I think this is really awesome that you are encouraging the school district to write a sustainability plan. It's really important. So thank you. Thank you so much. And I think it'll help us to collaborate on our climate action plan implementation. So thank you so much. And it would be fun to hear about some of the other things that you're doing sometime. Like I hear that you might be doing a clothes swap at the sustainability fair. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we're planning in June, having kind of a series of student presentations to the board on the work that's been going on.
Oh, fantastic. Would you like any more clothes for that?
Awesome. Yes, any clothes would be welcome.
Awesome. Stacy can let us know where to bring them. Thank you.
And Stacy, do you have just the wording of the motion?
Yeah, well, shorthand. for our letter to the ISD board to support with the sustainability initiatives. And then there was a potential addition with seeking, I don't know if you wanted that to be part of the letter to look for some formal engagement between the district and the board, or if that's something you want me to research. on my
I'd
own.
like to have it in the letter as part of the motion. I don't know if the seconder would be okay with that. I'd like to include that in the motion. You okay with it?
Yeah,
I-
I'm okay with that, but I wouldn't want that to be an obstacle as or a primary focus. So if that doesn't encumber it, yes.
I think Don was the second on this.
Focused on the second.
Okay with it, like Tom said.
And so and I'm wondering if is the language that we want, and like basically something along the lines of exploring like a more actual formal tie between the board and the school district.
Even having someone participate in our meetings.
Okay. I think just to follow what we're supposed to do, I think we need to make an amendment for that. So it sounds like Nancy, you're making it.
Would like to amend my motion to add a request to the school district to participate in the environmental board. Either as a student, administrator, in some way.
We have a second on that.
Yeah.
Don seconds that. Any discussion of the amendment?
I think it's pending on what Stacy finds out in the city.
Well, I think we need to just make a motion. Like we need to,
We can ask them
I
to
think
come
we
and
can-
actually vote and stuff like
I
that.
think she just asked her to.
Yeah.
And we could word the letter in a way where it's not affecting our message about supporting the policy work too. So, yeah.
So I don't see any discussion of the amendment. So just to be clear, we're only voting on whether to include the amendment that Nancy just made. We're not voting on the motion overall right now. So Stacey, if you could take us through a vote on just that amendment, whether we want to include that.
Engagement in the board.
Yeah.
Tom,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Raj,
Yes.
thank you, Ashwin.
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Great. The amendment passes, and so that will now be incorporated in. And now there's, again, if there's any discussion of the original motion with now that amendment on that Nancy made. Anyone? All right, and now Stacey, you want to take us through a vote on the motion of, if you could restate it.
Then I will prepare a letter on behalf of the board to the school district board to support the initiative, sustainability initiative proposed by sustainability ambassadors. And it will request participation in the environmental board from the school district. Right, Tom,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Raj,
Yes.
Ashwin,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
and Alex.
Yes.
Great, the motion passes. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you come back. I think with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item, Transportation Improvement Program.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Greg Lucas. I'm a senior transportation engineer in the Public Works Department. That's my first environmental board. And I got my manager, John, with me as well. Oh. And today we're talking about the 6-year TIP from the years 2025 to 2030. All right, so this presentation has a broad overview of what the TIP is, the selection process that's going into for the projects to go into the 25 to 30 TIP, get into the criteria that we use for the remote environment criteria for part of that, and then jump into the discussion, and then I'll give you a highlight of next steps from the TIP. The purpose for this presentation is to help create an understanding of what the 6-year TIP is. And then as well, part of the Issaquah's code highlights that the environmental board's responsibilities includes feedback pertaining to the natural impact or natural environment and the impact of the city programs, such as the TIP. Specifically, we would like this discussion around the promote environment criteria, which we had a couple weeks back with the TAB meeting. And then we'll kind of ask for your feedback based off of that discussion, the changes that were made. Get into the TIP a little bit more here. This is kind of more of a minor update to the TIP, so we focus more on some of the language in the policy, and the scoring values were maintained. It'll make more sense here in a second. But feel free to ask any questions along the way. All right, so what is the TIP? The Transportation Improvement Program, it's something that Public Works Department does every year. It's mandated by the Growth Management Act to kind of plan out our transportation improvements. It's the transportation element of the capital improvement plan, which gets updated every 2 years. This is an off year, so it's updated independently of the CIP. There's all sorts of plans that fill into the city's comp plan and CIP. And so the Transportation Improvement Program is effectively a list of what the projects the city is either working on currently, will be working on in the next 6 years, 2 years that are budgeted. Some of them are looking forward to applying for grants. And then it'll also show what phase the projects are on. So it could be funding for a design, property acquisition, construction, planning. It shows where the funds are coming from, whether it's city funds, impact fees, stuff, or city or state or federal grants. There's all sorts of projects that are listed in the TIP. Got annual concrete, asphalt pavement, maintenance type projects, annual projects starting on the left, ADA, that type of stuff, where we do a project every year. It's a program, so every year it gets some funding. There's other bigger projects that are or still, aren't finished. Those are the projects that are underway, multi-year projects. We've got mandated projects. Those are typically safety related. Got landslide repair, their walls, bridge maintenance type stuff. And then I guess this next slide, this is kind of what the TIP update does, is it highlights the new priority projects. Yeah, that's what we're focused on this year and adding. So one of the projects that we add to the TIP will be a few years out, unless I get budgeted in the next budget cycle.
We do have a question.
Sorry to make it. Can you go back to your last slide?
Yeah.
Okay, but either one. So why aren't we looking at, like, if we're talking about environmental criteria, wouldn't it affect the long-term projects since they're not completed and stuff in terms of maybe making them better, or the projects that are underway that may be making them better, or reprioritizing annual projects? I know mandated projects are usually a safety or something, the federal or the state. So wouldn't this criteria help inform a more environmentally friendly and sustainable future for all of the TIP projects that are in the TIP, not just the new projects? Can we apply this to all the projects?
Yes, and the master mobility plan, which the promote environment criteria, that was scored previously, so we're using that. I think was implemented in 21. And then we're kind of going through the same process again with an update. Because this is the climate action plan.
So we'll work on some criteria tonight. It will be whatever it is. Will that criteria apply to all of those 5 categories that you have up there? Or is it only intended to be used on the new priority?
Should be using the new.
Can it be used on the other projects? Is there a reason it cannot?
I can add a little bit. So the criteria that we're looking at is a score to show how much a project aligns with the guiding principles in the mobility master. And so, yes, it can be used to score the long-term projects, although I will say we're not looking at funding those in the next 6 years. And we have a very limited amount of time. So we may or may not be able to put a score to it. And I'm going to come back to the long-term projects to address your question. The short-term projects that are currently in there, yes, we can put a score to it, but a lot of times those projects, they're underway and it might be 60% design. It might be that we've already submitted a grant application, received a grant. And so changing the scope of a project underway is very difficult and expensive. And so the best use of this information is for us to refine the scoring criteria to prioritize the new projects that will be coming into the TIP. And so we're not trying to ignore the natural environment on the work that we're doing in the future or in the present, but what we really need to do is refine the scoring criteria to add projects into the 6-year portion of the TIP. And I would also say for the long-term projects, a lot of those are tied to things in the comprehensive plan and transportation concurrency, where to change those, we need to change other things. And so this isn't the avenue to do that, but we do hear that. And for example, we're going to begin a project to evaluate the city's concurrency system to see if it aligns, and level of service to see if it aligns with the guiding principles in the mobility master plan. So we're attacking it on multiple fronts. And tonight's agenda is really about trying to refine the scoring criteria so we can evaluate potential projects to do within the next 6 years.
But I'm going to keep pushing a little bit. So just let me, if I can. The annual projects will be in the every 6 year, they come up every year. So you're doing sidewalk replacement or something like that, putting in ADA ramps. But wouldn't this criteria be able to be used on like annual projects as well to help you identify if wherever you're doing the sidewalk replacement, is that the right place or not? Just to show that, we're really giving it a sustainable and an environmental lens when we're evaluating these projects. And I question that on all of those categories. I heard you, John. I just wanted you to know I heard what you said. What I'm trying to do is think about a change in mindset. And I know that you guys have projects in design, and I think that's a different category, but it might just mean that as you're building those projects or designing them, you're thinking about some of the things we come up with in the criteria during design, if you can. We don't want to do a wholesale change in the cost, but I'm just trying to change the mindset of the TIP. And if we're just looking at new priority project, we're just touching a little bit of it, not touching the whole transportation system, which is one of our bigger generators of greenhouse gases. And so really trying to get folks thinking about it differently. That's just my thoughts.
I have a related question. Are any of the other groups of criteria that are being discussed going to be applied any differently? So are they all going to be applied to the new priority project, or are there certain criteria that we're not discussing here, but not the promote environment criteria that would apply to more of those categories.
Yeah, there'll be a couple slides away. You'll see there's like 5 guiding principles that get scored. So they all, we changed a couple of them with the tab.
I think my question might be a bit different. Like, it sounds like we're working on a promote environment criteria that will primarily apply to new priority projects. Are all the other groups of criteria going to be applied to that same new priority projects?
There's kind of a highlight of how we're doing the project selection process for the new projects. There's kind of the scoring criteria from the master mobility plan that we're going to get into the discussion here with. And then there's also the CIP element where in the last CIP, there was kind of a citywide consistently used matrix that color coded certain elements of the projects, yellow, red, or green. And so we'll filter it through that after we score them as well and make sure we're consistent both with those principles as well as the master. I do have, what see, this is what CIP and the CIP looked like last year. Just hard to see the projects, but it kind of highlights the color-coded nature, the guiding principles. So the mobility master plan was adopted into the comp plan in 2020. Goals and policy were, and the strategies and actions in 2021. To achieve the city's mobility goals, it established 6 principles. The first one is improve mobility within Issaquah today. Second one is prepare for growth. Third one is better connect Issaquah with the region. Fourth one is promote environmentally sustainable mobility. Fifth one is invest wisely. Sixth one is anticipate transformation. I don't think got any score. I think the first 5 got scored. Okay, that was a total of 74 points total possible for each project. When the mobility master plan was implemented, the city scored over 100 projects. The top ones were identified in implementation. The remaining ones were recognized as other investments that could be reevaluated in the future, which is kind of what we're doing while we're here. So those remaining projects, plus any new ones that have bubbled up since then, are getting scored using evaluation criteria. So you kind of see the points each criteria got. From environment, 12 points. Since the implementation of the mobility master plan, the Issaquah's climate action plan has been adopted. That's another reason why we wanted to look at the MMP. It had transportation and land use goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation and improve community mobility through sustainable land use planning, accessible multimodal transportation options, improved cycling and pedestrian networks, and expanded EV infrastructure. It also targets to reduce non-drive alone mode share 15% by 2030 and 20% decrease in vehicle miles traveled by 2030.
The vehicle miles traveled, is that just on Issaquah streets? It doesn't include
I don't know, and it doesn't.
see how you can influence miles traveled on I-90.
Right. I think we're trying to get a better understanding of metrics. Actually, the tab brought up a question of is that per capita or total? So for people are within vehicle miles traveled. So I think we got some refinement to do on nailing that one. Exactly that one. How to achieve that goal. The transportation and land use strategies.
We do have a virtual. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ann.
And you can go ahead, you're muted.
Thanks. I just wanted to reiterate what Don was saying, his question about if it's vehicles driving through Issaquah or anywhere in Issaquah, or if it's has to do with Issaquah residents. This seems to be a gray area in a whole bunch of the plans. And so if everybody could get together and figure out what we're talking about, that would be super helpful.
Didn't David cover this? As part of the GHG
Yeah, I think,
story, and I thought it was all travel by anyone that, regardless of whether they're resident on any road.
I think that's correct, because that was PSRC data that was looked at. I can verify that, but I don't know how the one for the land use or for the master mobility plan, if that's any different, but
I don't think.
yeah, we'll get clarification.
That's a good question.
Thanks.
All right, so the climate action plan identifies three transportation and land use strategies. One is to decrease auto reliance through sustainable land use planning that encourages dense mixed use development patterns in central Issaquah and nearby multimodal transportation networks. Number two, reduce overall automobile use by promoting biking and walking and advancing shared and public transportation options. And then the third one is to reduce automobile emissions by expanding EV infrastructure and helping facilitate the transition to electric vehicles. I'm kind of jumping to what the mobility master plan and the promote environment section said in the guiding principle, the evaluation criteria, and the scoring. And this was before the TAB meeting, before our discussion, so this was as adopted. The guiding principle.
Speak up just a little bit since you're looking that way. It's hard to hear.
We may, if possible, if there's any way to, I mean, I think it's relevant what it was before, but if there's any way to get, so I think we're gonna be a little tight on time.
Okay.
So if we can get to where the net result is.
Yeah.
I think hopefully the board had a chance to review. It might be better to focus on just where it stands currently, and then we can, I want to make sure we leave enough time.
Yeah, and that was gonna be the question I has, the easiest way is to kind of go through it all and then jump back, or we can kind of go through each one by one.
Okay.
And then,
Oh, great, yeah.
so, I mean, either way it works. We can kind of do the discussion as a whole. So each of the next slides kind of gets in more detail, so I'll just jump to those. So 4.1, the first criteria in the promote environment. It said project encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment, including shifting to non-auto modes and add a 4, 2, and 0. Jump to the bottom, that's the end result after the TAB meeting. Promote or project, if a project encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment. Get 4 points. If it doesn't, it's 0. Kind of, I mean, we talked a long time at TAP about a lot of these, so maybe the highlights of those discussions, or we can kind of just react to the outcome.
I guess my 2 cents would be, it might be helpful if we can move quickly through this and then just, because I think there's going to be comments maybe that are specific to what's there, and there might be comments that are on what isn't there. And so if we could, I think moving through these, and then it's helpful to have this context and then actually discussing it as a whole, and we can move through the whole, but I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if we need to jump into the summary of the discussion. And that could be part of the conversation. We'll jump back as well. Second criteria was that the project avoids sensitive areas. Add 4 points for project avoid sensitive area for water quality, specific to that. And the outcome of our discussion was a change from avoids to enhances, improves a critical area or sensitive area. A simple yes or no. So we're just trying to capture more areas. Main change was improving instead of. 4.3 was if the project was in the park strategic plan. There's actually no changes to it. So this slide shows the outcome. What I basically just went over. It jumps us to the last slide, which is the discussion. So let's just open it up. Questions, comments. Happy to jump around.
Now we'll add that the vice chair of the TAB, Julian's here. Oh, and Tom's here too. So we also have representatives from the TAB. If you have questions that Greg or I can't answer, or get some context from a board member to board member, they can provide that too.
Thank you. I think we'll go Praj and Nancy.
Hi, this is Praj, and so I'm just curious to see if the transportation improvement plan in any way is affected by the sustainability purchasing policy of City of Issaquah. You know, are you guys making any changes to the materials or moving towards the use of more environmental friendly materials or anything like that? Or
During construction.
right.
Typically, I mean, certainly not in the scoring criteria is that reflected.
Okay. But so there hasn't been any change per se in or nobody has looked at the use of materials or, you know, the companies or the brands to be used if they're more environmental friendly or things like that. I mean, I'm just curious to see if it has been a consideration of the transportation improvement plan.
I can, do you want me to respond? So we are just starting to roll out that policy. We've had one meeting with operations specialists, administrative teams. We'll be starting to meet with Public Works in the next month or two. So while the policy's passed, we are just starting kind of the launch and integration into the thinking for future purchases. So that just to say it's not fully integrated throughout all the departments, not to say that the transportation team isn't taking that into consideration. Another policy we'll be talking about hopefully later this year that might be more relevant is a green infrastructure policy, which would impact the types of materials as well that we're purchasing for these types of projects, as well as the contractors we're working with. So I think those two policies together in the future will have probably greater influence, but in terms of the sustainability policy, that is just kind of beginning to roll out and probably will be a consideration as these projects move forward, but may not be kind of top of mind now because we haven't even yet met with all the staff. But it's a great question, Raj.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. And I totally understand it, especially for construction projects, you know, it may not come immediately. It may take a while to get completely integrated in the construction projects for some of the reasons he already mentioned, you know, because half of them are like 60%, you know, design or 50% design and all, and it's difficult to change. The other question I had was, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but is adding green spaces or, you know, any kind of, you know, greenery a part of the transportation improvement plan? And the reason I'm asking is I just came across some, you know, airport parking structure today. Somebody had posted the video where it's an actual thing where they actually have plants planted over the, you know, the parking spaces. I would be curious to see how it's working and if it's actually staying intact after 5 years. But still means, putting that effort to add green spaces does help. And I was wondering if that is a part of transportation improvement plan as well.
So as part of the transportation improvement program, I would say the TIP is a list of the projects that we're going to work on. And then as we work on the individual projects in the TIP, we have to meet city standards. And one of the standards is to put in a landscape strip between the curb and gutter and the sidewalk in order to have a planted space between the vehicles and the pedestrians. So that would be a green space that we do put in our transportation projects that is required by city code.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy.
Well, I would like to request the tab and the administration consider 3 or 4 more additional environmental criteria. And they're going to come from slide number, let me find it, 12, where it says the Issaquah Climate Action Plan says that we should be reducing greenhouse emissions from transportation plan. So that would be a great goal. Will this project reduce potential greenhouse gas emissions? 0 points or 4 points? Yes or no? It's an easy one. What we're showing then is that we're listening to the climate objectives along the way. And many projects won't, but it might start to change your thinking about it. The second one, I'm going down the next slide, Climate Action Plan. There's 3 points there that came out of the climate. Go down to the next slide, if you would, please. So there's 3 points there, each of which, in my opinion, should be included as criteria for projects being considered in the TIP and should be evaluated like others. Because then we're also doing more about transportation and its impact on climate. So does it decrease auto reliance? You don't have to put the sustainable land use, but does it do that? Does it reduce overall automobile use by promoting biking, walking, and advanced shared and public? I think those are great criteria that are all transportation related that could get a 0 or a 4 point. It would also help us improve that connection between the Climate Action Plan and the TIP. And it's really not a major change for your new projects, but it might bring about in future TIPs different kinds of projects that you might be thinking about this criteria as you're identifying projects in the future. That's my recommendation for you to consider as you're improving things. So I think these are important things adopted by the council. And it's part of what we need to be considering as we're looking at new projects or existing projects on the TIP.
Couple clarifying questions first. 0 to 4 scale. So is it 0 and 4, or is it a sliding scale between 0 to 4?
It's either 0 or 4.
Why not a sliding scale?
I mean, we went from a 4 to 0 in one of the criteria to a 4 or 0, specifically to give more value to the ones that do meet the objective instead of kind of having a halfway meeting. So the ones that do meet those objectives, get effectively a little bit more of a boost than the ones that kind of meet it.
I think you're gonna have a hard time. Just think about that as we look forward. And then I have a question around the project, changing the wording from project avoids sensitive areas to project enhances critical or sensitive areas. Great that you added the word critical, but why did you remove avoid? Wouldn't you want to avoid sensitive and critical areas at all costs first before plowing through them and mitigating for them?
Yeah, and I think that's probably.
And asked another way, right now, something that does no harm but no benefit is scored the same as something that has a huge harm. There's another way to ask Dom's, it's like, because it's only in the positive that you get points.
So I'll kind of give you a little bit of the background on why that decision was made in a good way. Yeah, do you want?
Yeah, we can go on the transportation board. It's hard to avoid anything. So either you're going to impact it or not, or just about everything you're going to impact. So is there a net benefit For example, if you hit a wetland, if you're doing wetland banking, you're not really improving anything. Just take this, why don't you make it somewhere else? But if you're removing, this is, make it an example, of taking 5 lanes going down to 4, you're taking pavement out, so you're actually could be enhancing something that be not based on a wetland banking, for example. That would be an improvement, so that would be a good score. That's kind of our thinking as far as it's almost hard to avoid anything anymore, but is there a way that we can enhance what we're going to be impacted? That's kind of what we were thinking about, as opposed to avoid.
Which goes back to my comment about the sliding scale. You can better use that.
Yeah, sliding scale is hard because, and so what kind of makes it, sort of makes it, either it does or doesn't. And so that's why it's either like you're getting the benefit or you're not.
I think the comment about avoid should stay in there. I mean, if you're coming down the road and you have a choice of either going through the edge of the wetland or moving it over 50 feet so you're out of the buffer, preference would be to move it over if you have the land and the resources. My comment. And then just one quick comment for you around stormwater, from passion lies. As you're building your landscape strips in your standards on your streets, please consider using that as a bioretention swale to treat your stormwater as well. Try to get away from traditional stormwater standards with 6 ppd emerging and all the damage it does to our fish. Anything we can do to treat it before it hits the streams.
All right, Alex and then Dixie.
Thank you. This is Alex. I want to thank the other board members for what they've said so far. I am in agreement with a lot of the comments, especially Nancy's, with potentially adding some of those other things directly from the climate action plan, because I think that that is the way that we will actually be able to hit some of those targets with these transportation improvement plans, with these projects that are going forward. I like the addition of the enhances critical or sensitive areas. I appreciate that you're giving more weight to projects that are doing that, and that includes some sort of opportunity to improve habitat or improve stormwater retention or those types of things. But I also understand the other board members' questions around removing the avoids. So what I think I'm missing here is the context of what then falls beneath these overarching goals, outcomes, or point these things, because there's no, how is staff or whoever's reviewing these projects making an objective choice about how those rankings are falling out? Is there established, what do we mean by project enhances critical or sensitive areas, and what is the level that it needs to meet in order to receive this for? Because if it's just, we're gonna plant a couple of trees along in a riparian area along the stream and it's really minimal, that shouldn't rank as highly as a project that is going to plant an entire wetland or remove blackberry from a large area and reestablish plants in more than an acre or something like that. So I think that's where I myself am struggling to figure out, like, how does staff actually evaluate to award these points?
How did you, was that a question maybe to Craig and John about?
I think it's a question. If there is some context to be able to provide it, that would be great. But if there's not, can the tab and staff think about providing some of that so that there's no questioning in the future of what the actual goes into these point rankings?
I can make an attempt to answer the question. So the thought behind it is we have a lot of code that says what we can and can't do for the natural environment. And usually it goes through this mitigation sequencing, avoid, minimize, mitigate, I forget exactly, but basically when we're talking about this improved criteria, we're talking about going above and beyond. And so when we're looking at a project and there's a wetland, the first step is always to try and avoid the impact to the wetland. And then if you can't avoid the impact, and then you go through And so we don't want to score the 4 points to a project that's meeting the requirement established by code. We're wanting a project that actually makes it better, because if you are mitigating your impact, you're maybe getting back to what you had, maybe not, but you're just meeting the legal requirements. We're really wanting something that will make an improvement. And it is a little bit subjective, but through the lens of the minimum that you're required to do by code or by other rules doesn't cut it for the 4 points.
Alex, do you have any follow-up questions on that?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, and then, Anne, it looks, did you put your hand down or did you still want to speak?
Oh, thanks, Jamie. I put it down. It's a great discussion and everybody's hitting the points that I was thinking of too. So great job.
Thank you, Anne. I had a few comments. Overall, I feel like while I think it's well intentioned, I feel like the current criteria feel kind of weak, and it may have actually moved in the wrong direction. And I'll explain a couple of reasons for that. One, I'm encouraged by that we're trying to figure out ways to show the positive side of things when there is a benefit that can be achieved with the project. I agree with Dawn that we haven't done enough to differentiate between us, like just an extreme example. If we go and pave a 10-lane highway, it gets the same score as something that's just not doing anything like positive. And so because there's no, it's a yes, no, there seems like there's that you've lost the, are you trying to actively avoid, and you're not showing the situation where there's a significant impact, and that is different from just not having a benefit. So I don't know if that's a 2 in the middle, there's some other criteria, if that's a separate thing that you're doing a separate criteria entirely, where it's like everything has been done to avoid the area, the impact on a critical area. I'm not sure exactly how that comes to life, but right now, that's my concern, is that it feels like that there's not enough differentiation between a significant impact and no net gain. So that those seem like those should be different in the scoring. I think the project encourages travel to be less impactful on the environment is not, to me, a clear enough criteria. I think maybe single occupant vehicle time is, I think that's what it was adapted from, correct? That was at least a measure. I worry that that's a very subjective, that's one, I think Alex's point around how are you actually evaluating that? What gets a 4, what gets a 0? I don't know what that means. And so I think that worries me, that it's not super clear what that is going to measure. And so I think single occupant vehicles, reducing vehicle miles traveled, there's a lot of potential measures, and at least calling out what those measures might be of what like impactful to the environment, what it might look like, I think would be helpful. But right now, it just seems like a very unclear criteria. The park strategic plan, while parks can be beneficial to the environment, they also cannot be beneficial to the environment. So I think it's like, again, I'll use extreme examples. Like if someone decided to go make a park at Park Point and cut down all the trees at Park Point and put a road to it, this would give that a 4 if that was in our park strategic plan. And I'm not sure that like, I think a lot of times the park strategic plan would be aligned with environmental. It's not necessarily 1 for 1. So I'm just not sure that maybe that needs to live somewhere else. Maybe that needs to be adapted a bit so that it's clear that it's a park project that actually supports the environment versus some of our more developed parks that wouldn't necessarily fit into that criteria. I think also what Nancy brought up around the other elements, and actually what Praj brought up, I think is important. I know we're early, but consideration for the materials and basically efforts to reduce the carbon intensity of the materials used in development seems like a criteria that we're not ready for, should be in the next TIP. It's not in this one, and understand with status on the project that David's working on, sustainable purchasing might not be ready, but that seems like a really important consideration that's not being captured. And then I think also we don't mention electric vehicles, anything that we can do to not just electric vehicles, but other ways to reduce, like, if there's gonna be miles traveled in the city, how can we reduce the carbon intensity of it? Electric vehicle from a ICE, yeah, are there other ways that we can reduce the carbon intensity, not just in reducing miles? It just feels like there, some of those main elements of the ICAP aren't really incorporated, and there's opportunity. I know there's a lot that's being added with the ICAP, but it feels like a lot of the carbon intensity of travel and isn't being captured in any way. I mean, I know that there's kind of the vehicle miles traveled would kind of do that, and there's some shift. I think there's other criteria that might talk about shift to walking and biking, but we don't, in the environmental element, that's not called out anymore. So that I think just evaluating where we have opportunities to add, like things about electric vehicles, other ways to reduce the carbon intensity of travel. And then, let's see, is there anything else? The only other thing that I don't see, and this is again something I think that could be specifically called out in the enhances, but I think we don't talk about like animal passage, and I think that could be in that enhanced goal, but I think something that we don't. You're talking about area, like reducing the area of a wetland, or trying to increase the area of a wetland with the project. The other thing that I think we should be thinking about is how do we also create connectivity between ecosystems with our transportation projects? How do we go beyond what WashDOT has mandated to actually help with the projects? That to me seems like another positive that maybe it's captured, but I don't know that we've really called it out specifically enough with talking about connectivity between ecosystems, not just are we increasing the size of a wetland or increasing. So that's another area that I think there's opportunity to evaluate how that might come into the criteria. Any other, and if you have any, if there's any responses or anything, I didn't ask any questions, but if there is anything you want to say, feel free to. Any other questions or comments from the board? Right. Any other questions that you have for us?
I had just two thoughts I wanted to share. The first one is going back to what Nancy talked about. And Greg, can you go to the slide where we showed the things that she was talking about? Okay, so inside the scoring criteria, outside of the environmental criteria, we do hit on the first two. So projects do score points for those two. Number three, though, I don't think anyone was thinking about that when we came up with our criteria, but that might be as we think about how to apply we go to the one now where we show the 3 revisions that the tab made. So as we look at 4.1, I think one of the main takeaways that I'm hearing from the environmental board would be to consider, Jamie, let me see if I can find your words. I wrote them down. Climate.
Carbon intensity.
Yes, thank you. Couldn't find it. So as we think about that through the lens of carbon, what was it again?
Carbon intensity.
Our carbon intensity. And because that was one of the things we were talking about is VMT, vehicle miles traveled, versus having not just one person in their car. But then that also allows us to consider electric vehicles. So when we consider whether a project gets those 4 points or the 0 points through the lens of carbon intensity. And so I think that would make it so that way the projects that Stacy has, we're looking at doing charging infrastructure, that would hit those. A project that would reduce vehicle miles traveled would hit those. A project, we don't have a project, but let's say we had a project to have a bus queue jump lane, that would hit that. So looking at it through that lens.
The only other thing that, and Dawn sort of hit on this, that I think having a 4-0 scheme, I understand why you're doing it, but I think it risks losing the difference between like an ancillary benefit of a project being one of these things versus this project is being done explicitly to create a bike lane, and that's going to reduce vehicle miles traveled versus something that's, I don't know what a good example would be, but so it feels like right now it's so binary. Do we lose some of the ability to show degree of benefit with that? So, because I think some of the other criteria do have more, there's more state like levels to them than these now have. At least from, I don't know if they've been updated, but the ones that we were originally in. Nancy.
And I appreciate the feedback on, going to electric vehicles and reducing, automobile use in other categories. But if we're looking at something that's environment and climate action, it would be great to have it in that section because it is part of it. I don't know where else it is in your criteria, since we don't have all the criteria, but I just think it belongs in environment and climate. I don't know where you've got it elsewhere. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that is all.
Just a process question to
Yeah.
the board. I think the team's heard the comments, they'll be in the video notes. Does the board want a letter written to TAB? That's one approach we've used in the past. We can summarize the comments. This is our, I think, one chance to provide that input on the criteria.
Since it's one of our responsibilities when the board was formed to provide written feedback that follows a project through to the city council. The only way we can do that is through something in writing that comes out. That's just my feedback. And this was something that was specifically identified in our formation of the board. So I think it's important we follow through on what they asked us to do.
I agree. And thank you guys for coming. I agree. Yeah, this is rare that it's not entirely dependent on a letter, but so thank you so much for coming. I think that's amazing community service commitment. So thank you so much for coming. But I would agree with Nancy that a letter would be helpful just to summarize. And I know you guys will bring a lot of that, but I think us just getting it all in one list that everyone can review would be helpful.
Great. Okay, that was my assumption. I'll draft something up and send it to Jamie and Dawn. Jamie's gone. I'll send it to Dawn, and maybe if you want to identify someone else. What's that?
I'll be able to look at it. Just might take a little more time.
Yeah, I probably won't. Well, I think TAB meets, I think the issue is TAB meets again in 2 weeks. Is that correct? So that you would need our feedback before that. Correct.
So I think we should have it before the TAB meeting. And because Greg and I need to put together the tip, we will actually both Greg and I took notes. We will take in mind your consideration or your comments as we put it together on Friday.
If you want to get it out, Stacy, you can include Nancy on that too, and Nancy and I can review it.
Great. I'll do that. I'll get you something by, it probably won't be till Monday, but at the latest Monday.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for learning us.
Yeah,
It was awesome.
Thanks.
So I think with that, we'll move on to our last main agenda item, which is board retreat follow-up. And I think I'm actually probably going to be, Stacey, is there any overall that you wanted to? Context you want to provide, or do you want to come straight into that?
We can jump right in.
So what you're looking at was a document. The goal of this was we had our retreat, we had our the survey that we filled out. So we had a lot of feedback from the board, which was great. What we tried to do, Dawn, Stacy, and I tried to do is kind of from all of those conversations, synthesize down to like, what are the goals that we felt like the board had coming out of the retreat? And then what are some potential changes that we could make to make that happen. And so the document here is not necessarily like, it's not a formal document, but it's something that we intended. For example, if there's a new chair next year, that this would get sent to that, and any new members of the board receive this document. And that would be, it might be something that gets amended over time, but that this would be something that would be used over time to continue to kind of get through the process that we want, get to the goals that we have laid out here. So any questions on kind of what this is, and I'll give a little more context on how we're going to go through this document before we get started, but any other general questions?
Jim, so we were taking in the retreat, there were flip chart papers full of notes. Is this the summary in your opinion of those notes, or is this something a little different than that?
So, yeah, I don't know if we would say it's the summary of that. It was trying to pull out the main themes. It's not like everything, it's trying to pull out the main themes and then what we could do, what is actionable, what could we do against them.
That helps me.
Some of that's also the work plan, so I think
It's a little both.
it's a little bit of both. Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Great, and so the idea with how we're going through this document, most of you probably read this document. We're gonna go through and just read through section by section, take your feedback as we go through, and then we will take any feedback and then potentially make updates to that document, depending on what the feedback, depending on how much feedback we get, what kind of feedback we get. So the goal is have a conversation today about what everyone thinks of what is here, if there's things that are missing, things that should be changed, and then have a final version for us to kind of all be agreed on and be moving into this. I mean, we'll also approve the work plan later tonight with Stacy, or work on the work plan. But hopefully by the next meeting, have something that we have clear next steps. We have a clear document here that lays out what are updates to the process. So I think what we can do now is just, if there's any comments on this top section about the new member process or the goals that we have laid out. I don't want to read through the whole thing. So feel free to read through it yourself if you haven't, or hop in if you have any comments or questions. But if we could maybe focus right now on anything that we think isn't covered, should be changed, or general feedback on what is covered in the goals at the top for youth and new members, and for the new member process.
We'll see if I can read my writing. So I'm gonna have to start typing it. So in the youth member process, you have youth members are assigned regular mentors to provide support to youth member. It's all there, right? You know where I'm that second line. I think in the new member process, probably valuable to also put in this part where it says they provide, mentors will provide support to the youth member and may provide input to youth on where to focus, review, and agenda packets, answer questions, and help engage during, like, take out the youth part. But I think that's also probably helpful for new members of, like, you know, you get this big packet. It's the same thing that they would have to go through, like, it's 100 pages long, you know, this is how I go through it. So adding it into just the new, I don't know that I had a spot specifically, but in the new member process is probably good languaging as well for new member as well as you.
Would that be a one-time sit down with the new member, go
That's
through that,
Well,
or?
that's probably I mean, there's probably a way to do it. We've got, we're gonna pair people, well, maybe it's actually part of the orientation too.
The idea with the youth member, from what I got out of it, was that this mentor would be an ongoing mentor for this youth member. So as packets came out, you'd ping them and say, here's the 3 or 4 things you might
Maybe
want to take a
clarify.
look at.
That's not, that wasn't how I cut that, but I do think if when we're talking about the orientation, these might be important points to make sure we include. Not just like, here's the documents, here's the resources, but here's the best way to approach the information until you get up to speed.
And I think if you had a new member coming in Title 18 at the time that we were doing that review,
I think you're lost.
they'd be totally lost. They'd be walking out of here going, what did I sign up for? So I think having it ongoing on a mentor as needed for new members who help.
Well, the new member says, stop, I've got it.
Yeah, when they say, you know, you just reach out and say, any questions I can help with? Done.
I wasn't going to capture
Yeah.
comments as we go? Is that distracting to folks or is that helpful?
No.
Okay.
I guess I'm gonna have a couple, you want me to just go through my notes so that, or is it?
Is it on other part, is it like the lower section?
Well, I have a question actually, so maybe a clarifying question. I've been looking at this youth member on it, and so that seems to be trying to really wrap our head around. I know that it's a 2-year term.
Mhm.
Should we look at, or can we look at maybe making it shorter? Because, for example, I work with a lot of youth in my day-to-day. And they have every year. So I'm wondering to make the engagement process higher if perhaps that's something we should think about, or maybe that's not even an option. I don't know. So maybe something to consider. And then, if they're enjoying it, they could renew, just like the process would be for anyone else. They could extend it, but maybe it gives a little more flexibility for that position.
I think the only challenge with that is like the ramp up is so significant on the board that everyone, if you did a new youth member every year, someone would have to be ramping up the full ramp up, and maybe they would renew and it would not be an issue, but that would be my one concern is if it wasn't a 2-year term, you wouldn't have someone learning in that first year and then being able to apply it in the second year.
Are you finding that's what's happening now? Like
Goal.
But are we achieving that goal, I guess, right? Like, are we getting them ramped up in a year and then able to really participate? You know what
I
I'm
think
saying?
the short answer is no. I think we need to figure that piece out and how, and Ashwin, if there's anything that you have to add on how, on this topic, on the specific thing we're talking about now, or how we, in generally on the youth member process, how we could better support you, better support your peers, would love to hear your feedback. But Daisy, I think the short answer is no, I don't think we have, and I think we need to figure that out. But I also, if we do what we're trying to do here, which is get people ramped up better than we have, then that's where I think we would potentially lose all that ramp up period if we've done it right.
Well, I think that maybe that's what I'm saying. Maybe we need to look at the goal of because a goal for a regular member, maybe the goal for the youth member is different, because what they're going to contribute might be different because the perspective is different. And so, the ramp up might not be the same, right? Like if they're sitting next to you, if they're partnered with someone and they're sitting next to you in the meeting, they might, who knows, they might even during a meeting be like, hey, can you read my note? Like, am I on the right? Like, there might be different ways that communication happens. So the ramp up just might look different, right? And then the option to extend, I don't know, versus like having a position and then, finding out it's really not a fit. I don't know what that process looks like either, if they're able to leave the position. Like, I don't know. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Ashwin, I know Ashwin has to leave pretty soon. If you're still on and able to talk, if you have any thoughts on that, just the youth engagement as well as the duration of the term.
I think the duration of the term is pretty solid, but I feel like a lot of people that would be able to add lots of value would be juniors and seniors in high school. So having it be a 2-year term is difficult for seniors since most people would move out of the area after they get into college. So I feel like term flexibility for youth members would be better going forward instead of just keeping it at just 2 years.
So that may require changing the code that sets youth members at 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like 1-year positions would be good if you're able to keep applying again, if you like it.
Ashwin, any other thoughts on the youth member process?
I don't really know other than that. I feel like it would be nice to have a second youth member in the board as well, because it would make me feel a little less intimidated to speak more during the meeting.
Working on it.
Yep, work at read applicants.
I think one other thing that actually came up from the park board joint meeting was, which isn't captured here, but something we talked about was actually creating space for youth members to provide updates. So obviously on any topic, a youth board member could contribute, but similar to how the park board actually had time set aside for youth members to just update on things that are going on in their world. That was something else that I think we could consider including here. Ashwin, do you feel like that would be valuable or helpful if there was a time, I can't remember if you were here for the park board meeting, but having space basically to share updates on things that might be going on in school or organizations that you're involved with?
Yeah, that would be great, actually. And I feel like having a second member for that would also be really helpful. I feel like having that time dedicated just for the youth members would also definitely allow us to speak more about what we think about what's going on.
Something I'm just thinking of as you guys are saying that, the other thing that would be really cool about that is they have given a lot of time, and there's two of them, then they also can engage with each other to come up with what they talk about, which might be, I don't know, I would think that would be easier. Because you're kind of coming together to the board with the thing that you've talked about beforehand. So it's not just like, hey, school's really cool. Yeah.
I was just gonna share what I learned today is those youth members on the park board, they're not actually formal park board members. They're a liaison to the Issaquah Youth Advisory Board. So that's something we could also explore is having, well, we may have voting members that are youth members, also maybe considering a liaison, to the Youth Advisory Board that sits on our board as well. So that'd be the third youth voice, but not a voting member, but really there to kind of share and exchange.
Great. Praj, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had one comment, and I agree with Ashwin totally that, seniors will have a hard time keeping up the commitments and all. I do agree with, 1 year flexibility will be better. But at the same time, I do think, even the students or high schoolers do want to show more than 1 year of consistent, volunteering activity. It's better for their college applications as well as generally it's better for their experience. I have seen Issaquah School District specifically asking for 9th and 10th graders for certain positions. So you could consider that, maybe just, keep the 2 years commitment, but specifically ask for 9th through 11th grade or something like that. And so that, students get to choose if they can or cannot do it. That's all.
We talked a lot about youth members. Be curious, particularly any new members this year, any of the top section where it's not necessarily the youth members, but then just any new member, if that feels like that. I think we talked about a lot of this at the retreat, but is there any other thoughts from members of the board on that top section?
This 5-minute meet and greet, all I remember. It's like speed dating, is that what we're talking about?
I actually
We're just moving it on the table.
So the idea was right now, there's no, we do kind of a round robin and do introductions, but there's never the opportunity for everyone to meet the other members of the board and actually talk to them. And you have to either go mingle and network and kind of do that. But so it was more of a, whether you want to call it enforced or encouraged speed dating, which I think was a word that actually was used in here at one point. So we decided to revise, but yes, the short answer is yes. Is that good? You asked the question. I'm curious. Do you think that's a good idea, or is that?
I don't, I'm trying to, it's funny because now, it's been months now, right? So it's almost a year. But I don't know if that would have been more intimidating at that point. I love the idea of, the board kind of knowing who's on the board, and then you guys who have interviewed the incoming members and getting a feel for who them and being able to kind of pair. I love the idea of pairing people up. I think just to know that when you walk in, you know, you talk to somebody and, oh, I recognize that name, and maybe you had coffee with them already. I think that's great. I'm just trying to picture what that would look like, you know, if there's only, let's say there's 2 new members and we're all sitting, you know, what does that actually look like, you know, in process? You know, I mean, I don't know.
And Alex, feel free to hop in.
Yeah, one of the resources I would encourage be included in like a new member orientation, and also it would be great to have this stuff provided to current board members once it is developed as well. So we all have like that same basis, but is a like board biographies section, so that we can kind of have in our mind, like have an idea of who has what types of backgrounds to be commenting on these things. And if we have questions about something specifically, we know then like, who should I go to kind of get a little more feedback on really policy related stuff versus really environmental, like habitat restoration type stuff, would be helpful.
Yeah, we don't have anything like that.
So it sounds like something more like a resource or everyone around Robin sharing background or something, but maybe the biographies might be.
Less formal.
Yeah.
More, we just don't have a lot of informal time. Yeah. To get to know each other. I think that's what we were also just thinking too, so. A structured time, or even a 5-minute break occasionally.
Well, unless there's any other comments on this part, we can move down to the lower section. And this is probably the more, maybe for some, like, I think there's a lot here, so, like, we can't cover all this section. I think try to do it all at once. But yeah, the goal of this was to try to figure out how do we continue to improve how we communicate what our priorities, can communicate our feedback on things, and also try to figure out what does an annual process look like that might kind of build it into what we're already doing and make an annual board effective or a little more actionable. So that was some of the background of the motivations for this.
That top one's important. We had a lot of comments around this, about providing a memo to council on large topics, and Nancy mentioned tonight. Just to document what we do, it is part of our rules, are all that there. When this board was developed.
I think the code is so broad in terms of what we comment on. We were trying to get a little bit more specific here, but not put ourselves in a box. It's still pretty open to what we prepare letters on. But just our code is very, very broad, just as the TIP, for example. So we were trying to get a little bit more specific of what that particular focus might be.
Right now, it reads at the discretion of the chair and vice chair. Should that read at the discretion of the board? Should it be something that we all agree on? Or I mean, that board, it's easy enough. It doesn't have to be a vote, just easy enough. It's agreeing on.
I think that's better than just the chair and the vice chair. Everybody.
And just thinking through, like, how would you see that come into play? Because I think we debated even that. I was curious, one of the things we were trying to figure out is like, what does that actually look like?
I think that's where that next sentence comes in. Memo should be deliberate, impactful. Not the right memo for.
Oh, I mean, like, even the nuts and bolts of like, how would the board, literally any agenda item, are we as the board voting on whether we should do a memo on?
It's a vote. I mean, like Nancy had a good example tonight. She said, you know, this should be memorialized. I think it's just if
So if someone
feels-
start, like, someone
feels
feels
it
it.
should
that-
be.
okay.
I think, you may be thinking about it, or the chair, whoever the chair might be. This is something we should be, writing and following the paper trail.
I can give it a try. If it doesn't work, we can always, and this isn't a document that's set in stone, so.
It could be a discussion, where a member raises it, or even staff might say, raise it, and it's a discussion. So we could try it kind of informally.
I think the piece that we'll have to go with that is, that's our last time to see it before it goes to council. I know I raised it on something recently, because I thought it should be documented. And you said it's not our last time to see it. So if it's not our last time to see it, they may take all of our feedback and say, great. And then we have nothing to say. We provided feedback, they go, oh, we're happy.
Any other comments on the month-to-month process stuff?
I did have a little bit of a question. This is probably a Stacy question, but this kind of goes back to some of the new member stuff. But I was thinking, we have the agendas are kind of, a journal, a snapshot of a topic that we've discussed. But to have somebody go back through and read all the agendas is probably not going to be very effective. And so I'm kind of wondering on some of these topics that come back multiple times, is there like, I don't know what it looks like. So I don't know if it's like a spreadsheet, but even if it's just a summary of, on the third, we talked about reviewing this section of, so in the new member thing, they're getting here, this is what Title 18 is, and this is where we've touched it. So if I come in here, then I can go, oh, okay, right? Like a quick summary without creating a lot of work either. I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but to me, it would be something that maybe we'd be able to, like, I don't think it goes in the agenda necessarily month to month, but
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
the one place we do that a bit that we could probably expand is in the staff memos. They'll usually, and we've done this for the comp plan pretty thoroughly, but we'll summarize which meetings that topic came. What we could do for new members, in addition to that, is if the board has written a letter or that type, even if it was 2 years ago, maybe flag that for the members to make sure they.
Just like thinking about if there's a place you could go, so like talking about a transportation document, right? And if you've only seen it twice, but there's actually been 10 discussions about it.
Yeah.
You might be less effective because you're asking questions that have already been reviewed and there's like, we've already gone over that, so I'm like thinking very short, like that's what I'm thinking, a spreadsheet that says, climate action plan. And then at some point, we're done with it. And maybe we don't talk about it again.
The new board plan format kind of. If you were to combine that across multiple years, it would kind of do that. And Dixie, are you mostly just trying to, you think it would be mostly just understand, is this the 5th conversation, or is it someone goes back and actually reviews those? Like, how do you envision?
Twofold. I think about it, and I'll think about like from the context of like even outside of the board, just my daily life. And somebody comes in who's never been in the business, and they're like, "Oh, we should try this." We're like, "Well, we did in 2000, didn't work." Right? And so it's kind of a waste of energy. So twofold, just number one, kind of giving you more context of what's happening, but also, I think then it makes the conversation with the new members adding to maybe what they're adding is going to be better than with more information. But that's not even really something, even with a mentor, that might be challenging. You might not remember every conversation that's been had about every topic. So, and especially as the board gets older, it might be more challenging too. I'm just kind of picturing like a Reader's Digest version of like, here's what we talked about. We changed this, we fixed this, we did this section, and then we worked on this. Nothing like super elaborate, but just something that's like a one-page document that somebody could look at and really just kind of get a really broad overview of like what it is to give a deeper understanding, so that in the month-to-month process updates and all that information, when they're reading the agenda, they it feels like, 'cause it does sometimes feel like you're wading through an agenda going, and then you come to the meeting and you hear something, you're like, oh, okay, I understand what we're talking about now. But now I don't have comments because, it took me that meeting to figure out where we were. So
How much do you think that the mentor, like presumably most of the mentors would be someone that has, or mentors or pair, whatever the word to be used, that they have been on the board for at least a couple of years, so they would have some continuity across those. I think that document would be amazing, but it sounds really difficult to create, and I'm wondering if the person, that partner that the person that a new member might be paired with, are they that resource to go and ask, okay, what were the conversations on this? Or do you think it should be like?
I guess what I'm picturing is it would be maybe challenging to start it, but I don't think it would be challenging to keep it up. Because it would literally be like tonight, Stacy would go in tomorrow and go, one line sentence. Like, you have a tab on each of your spread, climate action plan, title 18, whatever, and open it up, 317.
Is it just recording the meeting, or is it recording what we talked about?
It's more, I think of it like a journal. It's actually almost kind of without, not lengthy, like we're talking 1 or 2 sentences of just, and maybe it's not important. To me, it just feels like you'd have more context to the topic than just like, here's, like, you get this broad overview, here's what it is. But like, some of these things are, the broad overview still doesn't really tell you, all of these pieces together, but this is a lot of it. That would be a lot of information we're going to do. So I think, not to say that the mentorship, I think, still provides value, but then the mentors, we'll lose some of the history too. Some of the stuff is going to be how many years? 10, or some of these things 10 years that were before we do it again. So I just wonder if there's, maybe it's not, maybe I'm thinking is silly, but I guess what I'm kind of picturing is something that would be it'd be so simple, not like super complicated.
Would it help you? Would you go back and look at the minutes if that would help you? So let me add. And so if we just took the topics that were in each agenda in the minutes and said on March 14th, we talked about transportation improvement and whatever. So you could go back and look at the minutes. If that's something you're confused about, would that help? Because I know I get lost sometimes. I don't remember when we last talked about whatever it was, and it comes back to us 8 months later, and I'm like, oh God, I can't remember what we talked about in the last one. So I have to go figure out what agenda that was on, because there's no summary of, we talked about all these things.
That's what I'm saying, you could avoid because it is essentially that without having to go dig for it.
Without having to dig for the
you wouldn't have to go find the minutes, because you would just go to that document that says transportation, and every time we touched it would be like a little, because we talk about how many topics in one meeting.
So like summarize what we heard tonight, transportation improvement plan, how would you one line that in there? Something along the lines that we heard from staff on transportation improvement plan for the first
They made adjustments on this section. We provided this feedback.
Memos being prepared to board or to the council.
And memos being sent.
And just be kind of an ongoing chronology. And that could live on do we have a website?
We have, yeah, so
Sure,
couple thoughts. Yes, we do not have a SharePoint site that you all have access to. We could set that up. We have the document we developed for the retreat that summarized all the major functional plans and the comp plan. I'm thinking maybe within that becomes a living document. We talked about having that for new members, but maybe it's accessible to all on SharePoint, and we add in these brief summaries. As I mentioned, I think Stephen's been doing a really good job in the comp plan memos of capturing linkages to all the previous videos that of our meetings where we've discussed the topics. What we could expand upon that is something council does where we have to report to council when a particular topic, other boards, commissions, or council meetings that it's been brought to, and summarize the feedback. So almost having that kind of section as standard in the board memos. So not just the linkages to the meetings, but what was the action or the decision. So So 2 improvements, 1 in our board memos, being able to provide that quick summary, and then 2, having a living document as a resource for all of you that links to those major plans and that 1 sentence summary discussion. I think we could.
I would say separated by the topic, like each page would have its own, like this topic, not topic's the wrong word, you guys will have to tell me, I think, like climate action plan, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think if we could start with those 2 and see if that would work. I think also having a SharePoint site you all have access to. I know David sent out like the greenhouse gas inventory data to you all, you know, instead of having sent that out as a one-time effort, just adding in there.
Yeah, like through emails.
Okay, the one thing I'll have to talk with the clerks about if there's any issues with.
So if there's a SharePoint site, we can't edit anything. We can't edit stuff.
We can actually give you access, but that we wouldn't want you to do that. I don't think. I think that would be an issue.
Yeah.
So if it's just us pushing information, I think that's probably fine, but I need to talk about that. So we can change the memos even for next month. And then let me play around with that document.
I mean, AI chat pop up this in the past meetings for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raj, I saw that you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to share on this? Raj?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
yeah. I didn't unmute myself, sorry. So I was also going to get to what Nancy was saying. I kind of agree with what everybody else was saying. I do think it will be hard to, come up with that document. I still think it's a lot of additional effort because if you just add, transportation improvement plan, that's not good enough. You need to tell what they said today and what the environmental board's feedback was. So it's essentially a summary document. So I kind of like the idea where Stacy was going, that come up with a plan document where you can have summaries of what's done so far, but not necessarily have it by the dates. The other suggestion was the same thing what Nancy said. I was going to say maybe you can refer to the meeting minutes when we are coming up with heavy discussions on these plans, like when was it last time discussed, so that interested people can pull up the meeting minutes before the meeting and take a look at it. That would be all.
That would help me.
Yeah,
We are not
I can, I'll be on that turtle.
No, I mean, that's pretty easy to do. It's mostly asking other staff.
Any other, I guess we can move down to the annual process if there's nothing else on the month to month. This includes a couple things. I think 1, the process that I had mentioned. 2, I think just what are we using to inform the conversation? So I think one of the things that this suggests is the environmental checklist may need some updates. If that's something maybe lower down that's covered. But, that's some of the context. Nancy.
So the thing that I'm struggling with is the timing of our annual board report. So at the retreat and listening to the council president and the other council member, it's apparent to me we're not influencing budget decisions or capital decisions because they're all made before we send an annual reporting. So we basically, whatever we send in our annual report doesn't add, we really think you should spend more money on EV charging stations. Whatever it is, we need more community solar. Whatever it is, our priorities are. But if we send that to them in December, it is too late to make any sense in terms of timing. And the other thing that might be helpful is to time it just as the changeover is starting to happen on the board as well. Because that would be a good timing for budget and capital program priorities. And it would be, we do it in December. And December, everything, the council's gone. So that is what I'm troubled with. They clearly would appreciate recommendations from us on some of that. I heard that at the retreat as well, but we are not being timely in our board report. or our end.
But the budget's on a 2-year cycle.
But they do play with things a little bit. But
And have a biennial adjustment.
Right.
They do.
Next year will be a big one.
Yeah.
That's the next year's the year for the budget.
Because it, was it May? When did they say they started that? Like, when do we think?
She said June.
All right, when are you doing your budget?
So they have,
David and I have started. Last time we did it, our requests were due in July. I think it'll be a little bit earlier than that. So we're planning to present to you all, I think in May.
Is this a full budget?
yeah.
The 2-year
Full
request,
2-year.
25, 26.
So is it better to have a memo accompanying that from the board recommending things, or is it better to put that in the annual report?
I don't know if I would see it almost separate as the annual report. I definitely hear it, you're saying of aligning the report with the changeover of the board and ahead of that process where it could summarize and influence, but I think the board outside of the report can write those recommendations as well.
When does council see the budget? I know they have to vote on it by mid-December.
Yeah,
When do they
fall.
actually see it?
I think so. I feel like last time it was around September. I don't know if that schedule is going to shift. Maybe a first review
That
September.
would be a good time to get something their way that says here where we feel you should spend your dollars.
But would we want to get that to the administration? Suppose we want to do something in the transportation program, something different in the transportation program. Would we want to do that, so that the mayor sees it as she's pulling the budget together, since it's her responsibility? Or is that too late? Just asking questions.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I know the process David and I will go through. I don't know what the process looks like in the other departments or what kind of filters it goes through or their timing for decisions. I would think probably before June.
The question is, when is it the appropriate time? Is it at the level when the directors are reviewing the budget? Is it the level when council?
Yeah.
Is it too late if council, like,
Usually it is.
Yeah, and
yeah, because I think Dawn's asking the right question.
By the-
Which stage is it actually?
I
By the
think-
time council gets it, there's very little change that they do.
Yeah.
City managers blessed it.
I think you want to get in with the
Administrator.
departments.
It's more about, yes, we agree.
And what David and I are working on is not only our own sustainability budget, but where we would engage or have a request of other departments to include in their budget. So we could share that with you, what conversations we're having with other departments. But I would think probably after we bring that to you all in May would be the timing to write the letter so you can influence the departments. Because yeah, Don's right. I think once it's already moving along by summer. But that I don't have a final schedule now. I'm just kind of basing this off of our first biennial budget.
The other question I would have for you, and it's a question for Bishop maybe, is that a memo to the city administrator's office, or is that a memo to council? Because the city administrator is the one that really blesses the
The mayor.
budget.
Mayor in this, isn't it?
Don't you have a city administrator in front of the mayor?
They work collaboratively, so it could be to both of them. Yeah.
So if we wanted to request another position, when would we do that?
I think that would be with a follow-up to the presentation David and I give in May. So I would say May. Yeah, if we see a final budget schedule and that shifts, I'll let you know if that needs to be April, but going on the last timeline.
It sounds
So maybe it's not the annual report, but that's kind of what I was trying to figure out, is how do we best get that in front of council and the decision makers? That's something we think about.
well, if you do it in May, that coincides with when we bring in the new members. So I mean, that could be in their welcome packet, is the annual report last year, is not highlight summary of here's what happened last week. Sure.
One, I don't know if I'm the only one that noticed, it seems like this time of year is always busy with the board.
Yeah.
That is one. Because if we're having to get that together on top of the workload we generally have this time of year, that could get, it pretty much every year it's been heavy this time. So that would be one. Do we set ourselves up for special meeting after special meeting to try to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And then I guess this might be this might be part of what you're saying, Nancy, it might be different, but it sounds like budget is something that we're really concerned about. Do we want the annual report to be the thing that does that, or do we just feel like we need a separate memo that we're sending on the budget, and then that might be informed by what we put together in the previous annual report, but if the budget happens every 2 years, for the most part, right?
Mhm.
Then should it just be that's an additional memo that we're putting together going into that cycle, and then we don't have to time everything else for that. I mean, hopefully we've done a lot of the work.
Okay, whatever you guys want, do in a separate memo, but I just think we should, since money always drives whatever we get to do
Mhm.
in the city. That's something you should try and influence if you want to do something.
Was that, so you have annual presentations to council, was that the thought behind that one, that would be an official presentation to them about the report, very bottom of the annual planning process?
Yeah, so in some context on that is this year we actually did present the annual report, and most of it, the annual report. It wasn't the annual report, it was the outcomes from the board retreat that we covered. But that I think is something that was valuable, because otherwise it's in their consent calendar that just some of them read it, but more of them don't. And most likely it's a way to, whatever the timing of when we do this, I think that's something that's valuable to at least make sure that everyone on council has heard what the board has identified as priorities. So
that would be where the focus would be in that, sharing how we want them to spend money.
well, it could be, and if it's an annual process, there's not a budget every or a budget review every year, so it might just need to be general priorities that they should. I don't know. I think we need to figure out what the content is, but
That would be here is our official, this is how we are feeling, this is the temperature, this is so if it's a presentation, maybe that's stronger than just a memo.
yeah, I think that was the goal, is we do both, because we have an annual report now. I think in past years, our annual report probably has not even caused approval. I think this year, just because we went, or they invited us, I think, but that seemed like a really valuable. There was another board that had their annual report on the consent calendar. I think the difference between us being there presenting it and then it just being in someone's packet is huge. So
I think the only board required to present is the Transportation Advisory Board. It's actually written in their bylaws to present their annual work plan. None of the other boards do that.
I thought it went well.
It's great to have that.
Stay there, watch fun.
Okay. We're rock stars.
I watched it.
I'm just, my thought on this is it's twofold. There's a memo to council in May-ish saying, we understand the budget's coming up. Here's our priorities for expenditures in the next biennium. And then we keep the annual report at year end, so we're not overloading our work. The budget memo can be very quick. Just a one pager. Here's our top 5 priorities. Should spend money next year. Consider.
An interesting conversation. Their top 5 priorities to spend money on.
I don't know. I just threw out a number.
Alex, go ahead.
Would that then be disseminated to the different departments as they're working on their budgets? Because that's where I'm lost in how does it go to council and then back out to the actual people putting the budgets together? Or does council prioritize then what those departments are working on or including in their budgets? Or does it just go to everybody?
That backwards, I think what Don and maybe you correct me, I thought that the annual memo was to council, and maybe actually the budget memo goes to city administrator director or something. Is that actually what you go to?
I mean, people that are really doing the budgets in spring are the directors and the administrators.
That's what I meant. Was the-
Well, but I think
It's-
Stacy, I think there's two things Don was talking about here. Because I thought there was a budget memo and then there was an annual.
Oh,
And right
yeah,
now it's an annual budget, which I think it's maybe there's two lines there. There should be a,
Biannual budget, annual.
yeah, sorry, this whole next section is on the annual report.
okay.
So I can, clean this up.
And then maybe should the annual in front of budget.
They do a mid buy.
Is there an annual budget review process?
They do budget adjustments.
I think we should still say every year, like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna be like, hey, you should have this huge project, but we know what the budget is, right? So then I think it maybe makes sense to still say, here's our 2
Here's our
cents.
priorities.
Yep.
Yeah, don't forget.
If they do an adjustment.
So they don't take away.
There could be a new project or capital project that we're recommending some funding for too, that may not have been in the biennial budget.
Cool. So it seems like we have covered annual planning process and then maybe just moving down to next steps. Any comments on any of that? Answer questions.
Sounds like we're gonna have to deal with the budget pretty quick. Probably at our next meeting. Make this,
Yeah, we're teeing it up for the May meeting. So it'll be with the new members. But if anything shift in the city schedule, make sure to schedule something with you all.
And it's probably not the end of the world if this year it's a little bit, it's not like everything's set. Oh,
That's a big one.
oh, I just mean like May isn't like a hard and fast, that's when they start the process.
Yeah, we don't have an official timeline. David and I have our budget, like our wish list right now.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to adjust, but if May timing doesn't work out, we will. At the latest, I'd say we start it in May. If we need to start it earlier, we'll make sure there's time to do that.
so if you are thinking about your budget and project, I'd really like to see the city. It may not happen in this 2-year budget, but I think we need someone that's an environmental person in the city. It is the one buck stops here instead of a bunch of departments working on environmental issues that are not necessarily communicating. And I know it's gonna be a tough sell. And I don't think it will happen in this next 2-year process, but I'd love to see it. And if we could continue to say it for 2 years, we might be able to get it in the third year. That's just my suggestion. I don't know how to do that with this city's process, but I feel like, having a committee of 8 people trying to deal with environmental issues is cumbersome. It's a waste of all of your time in some ways because there's too many people trying to solve the same problem. And it just does not allow the focus on the environment that needs to happen.
And you mean like the national environment, right? Someone that owns national environment.
Oh, but yeah, somebody that owns it is responsible for it, not just forests, not just trees, not just water quality, but the environment. And has to work like you guys do across all the departments.
Well, that'll be maybe a good thing, good
Well, I
part of the
think-
conversation for the,
But I'm saying it to her because I need her to figure out how to do it before we have that conversation, because she may say it's never gonna work. And
any feedback on any of that? Sounds like maybe not.
Raj, did you have a question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Anna,
No, sorry.
Great, well, I think that we have a lot of good comments, so Stacy will probably help us work on getting an updated draft of this, and then we'll be able to get something final for everyone to take a look at, but appreciate it. I think at the end, we'll talk a little bit more about just general feedback on the retreat in this process. So any thoughts on that, we'll come back. We're not just gonna get general feedback as well, but appreciate all the specific feedback on this. And Stacy, Raj.
Yeah, sorry. Now I do have a question for Stacy quick. Stacy, I know you were looking for youth board members and so did you get any candidates to interview or?
We did, yeah. I'll do a quick recruitment update at the end, but yes, we did get some great.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you for your help on that.
You want to move into work plan?
Great. Yeah, so this, the annual work plan is also, we saw part of the revisions to it were coming out of the retreat process. I guess just as a introduction, I've been attaching it to the agendas. We haven't really talked through it very much, but essentially this is a new format that all of the boards and commissions are using, just to create some commonality. Each board and commission liaison has been making some minor modifications, so it works best for their board and commission, but we're working within this general template. One of the main changes I've made is just in the description, adding a lot more detail. So we have a little bit more focus of what the questions that are going to be coming to the board are. What we've done with this since the retreat is try to capture more of the topics that were raised as priority or consideration. Yet it also encompasses where the administration is going to need feedback that falls within our IMC. Some of the items we added were more updates on the ICAP budget, more just adding in some more discussions around the natural environment checklist, also shifting the annual work plan review a little bit earlier in the fall. We've added in a few things such as the regular, scroll down under the administrative section. And I'm sorry, I have a couple of hard copies. I know it's pretty small if anyone wants a hard copy. One thing we did too, just to kind of hold myself accountable and staff accountable, is these monthly updates on the ICAP, on council, what have they been discussing, what's coming up. And then also the youth engagement piece, anticipating each month as space in the agenda for youth to share. So I was just going to walk through the work plan quickly, kind of give you an idea of what's in here, what we anticipate discussing this year. But first, just want to see if there's any general questions about the approach or structure.
I mean, what the colors mean again, the orange.
Yeah, I added, it's red in the hard copy, just some color coding where we have special meetings, just denoting if it's a special meeting. There's a couple of notes at the bottom of the work plan highlighting that. Of course, all of this is tentative until the agendas go out, schedule shifts, board priorities may shift, council needs to shift, but this is at least this month what we anticipate covering. So tonight we are just hoping to get kind of general feedback. Do you feel like this encompasses some of the needs coming out of the retreat, such as kind of having a better understanding of where exactly the board is providing input on topics, as well as capturing any of those key topics that the board wants to discuss? Hoping to get just kind of a thumbs up, this is headed in the right direction. Recognizing that, again, it could shift month to month if topics and timelines shift.
Stacey, you mentioned May was when you were thinking of budget.
Yeah.
Is that in here right now, or is that something you're
It
gonna?
may be under. It may not be under here. It's under, we're doing it as part of the ICAP midpoint check-in. That's where it'll come up in the implementation update. So that's where it will be, and I can.
You put it as a separate item.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
It's gonna be bigger than just the ICAP.
Yeah. Yeah, so just a quick snapshot of the items planning to come, comprehensive plan review. I'll talk in a few minutes. Just updates on what our next discussion will look like.
Stacey, one question. on
Yeah.
What we were just covering. I think one thing that we're gonna be lacking is we'll, from you, have all the things that you might be asking for in ICAP. It would be really helpful if we had context from other staff members on like what they, like Dan, for example, are there requests that he's making in the budget? We can talk more about this,
Right.
me and Don, but that's something that I think would be really beneficial to
Okay.
get a sense of what are other potential asks that we might want to put kind of on our list, or at least consider to have on a list.
Okay.
I have feedback on the general work plan.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing a lot on the environment in this work plan. And so there's some big projects being planned. I know that the Parks Director had mentioned some stuff that WashDOT's doing that will affect to increase fish passage. And I mean, at least hearing about some of these big environmental issues that are going on, it would be good to hear a few of them.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's others out there that are big environmental agenda topics coming up, but I'm sure some will come up in parks.
Yeah.
And some will come up in public works. But I think we need to keep some space in our agendas to talk about environmental stuff.
Just specific to the fish passage, would that also include just salmon recovery projects the cities?
Well, I know we've had people ask us to do something about, all right, you're the stormwater guy. You know, the chemical that comes off the tires.
6 ppd.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You know?
The last line item in the chart has that as kind of an open thing. Maybe that'll come up, maybe we'll.
Don't we have isn't there a stormwater update annually that comes?
Yeah, they haven't, let me check real quick. I don't think they've requested time, but I can check on that. Stormwater.
That's something we asked for a while back, was to have an annual update on
Yeah.
how it's going.
I think another thing that might be helpful is bringing on someone, I think, to handle the garbage contract.
Yep.
And recycling and trying to deal with, you know, we've kind of suggested trying to get to the business community a little more effectively.
Yep. Yeah, we have our new solid waste analyst starts next week, so I could have her come and maybe recology. There's zero.
Or just a written report or something, you know, just an update on it, just so that we.
Just kind of looking for a high level, what's going on around the city with other departments. And even other organizations. WashDOT. Yeah. School district. I don't think WashDOT's coming through Issaquah this year. No, they're not doing it for the street color. At least till next year, probably the year after. That's their only project.
Could talk to Public Works, at least get a written update on that, and then maybe at some point have a conversation. Great. Those are some great gaps. Any other gaps folks are noticing in the work plan?
One just note on that topic, I do think the natural environment checklist and some of the topics that we're talking about, I think they go kind of hand in hand if the natural environment checklist includes these certain items or includes, and that's part of the reason I think we might need to look at that, what that document contains again, because it just feels like we're getting that annually, but that doesn't feel sufficient. So I'd encourage, it's not until August, but and hopefully we can make progress before then, but that will be another opportunity, I think, to think through what should we be receiving on an annual basis? What should we be viewing? And what do we need to make sure that we're as up to date on what's going on with national environment topics as we are with climate topics? And go ahead.
Thanks, Jamie. I was just thinking for the ICAP implementation, couple of things. I want to make sure that we're celebrating all of our accomplishments sufficiently because I don't know, it just feels good to do that. And I know we do some of it like with the lead building, but even if we don't celebrate citywide, just here with the environmental board. And then also, if there's any way that Stacy, would it be helpful to let us know how we could potentially help more with the implementation, like with public participation and things like that? Are you already letting us know that, or are there more things that we could be doing if we want to? Like I would like to help out some more, and maybe other people would too.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. I don't think we're doing a good job at that. So that could definitely be something that we could highlight.
Okay, cool. I guess that's it. Yeah. Highlight and then maybe have it maybe an ongoing list of things that we could help out with. Thanks.
Great. I don't need to walk through this line by line, so we can just take general comments if there's other feedback. Yeah, all right.
Alex, go ahead.
Just one thing, and maybe it's on here and I'm just not seeing it, but the project, like the communications project that the other AmeriCorps person was working on, is that getting brought up again? Are we gonna see next steps for that?
Yeah, we hadn't specifically called that out. I think it could be part of the ICAP implementation update. Nick is going to be working on a couple different projects to carry through what Kathleen started. So we'll make sure to incorporate that. So yeah, it wasn't explicitly called out, but I'll make sure there's space.
Thank you.
Any other general feedback on the work plan? We have a lot on our plates again this year, but I think some good gaps identified where we can make some space for the late summer. A little bit later. Great. Well, I will continue to attach this to each agenda. So if there's feedbacks or you'll come up with other gaps, things that we're missing, or the timing just doesn't seem right for you when topics are coming, definitely like those. The adaptable, ongoing conversation. But I think in general, we just wanted to get kind of a thumbs up. This looks like it's going in the right direction with incorporating some placeholders for the topics that were raised tonight. Okay. Nods around the room, folks on the phone. It's headed in the right direction as a working document.
Looks good. Looks good, Stacy.
Great work, you guys.
Looking great.
Great. That was all we have. We were gonna maybe do just an open discussion on the retreat. It is 8:20, but
How much other business in this week?
I can make it quick, 4 minutes.
So, yeah, I guess if there's any, both what we talked about today, the retreat, anything in general, any observations or feedback that we'll have, we just wanted to give, not just talk about the specifics of what the outcomes were, but make sure that we had a chance to reflect on anything else that should be taken into consideration. So any other general feedback from kind of last meetings or just the retreat?
When gone, made it the retreat, I heard a couple of times from both the group and the council members, and there was a desire for a better connection between what's going on in council and what's going on in boards and commissions, not just us. I don't know how to solve that.
Yeah, the one thing I will continue to do, it's gonna do tonight is just brief updates on what they've talked about, what's coming up. I think Council President Walsh had offered even some kind of written memo, so that's something I could follow up on if that was still an interest of the board. I don't know how regular that would be.
It's valuable.
Yeah, one of the things that was in the work group that I was in with Don, we talked a little bit about if the environmental checklist was doing what we thought it would be doing. And I think that's going to require an extended conversation, figure that out. It was getting into one at the retreat. And so just a heads up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's part of why that's on the work plans.
But I think it would be helpful if we all, before we started reviewing, because we always just get it and we kind of say, oh, looks good. Or minor tweaks, but what are we trying to accomplish with this document? And I don't think we've all agreed what we're trying to accomplish with the environmental checklist instead of just reviewing what's provided. So I know I have something I'm looking for out of it and we haven't managed to achieve it, but I don't know what you guys are on. We need to have that conversation.
I agree. I'm looking for it as a metric, so we can. And maybe August is the right time for it to come, because maybe we'll have a series of projects that it can go through. I actually want to see how it's applied in real life. Is it working? And is there numbers we can pull away from it that says, yes, we're doing better, doing worse?
Yeah, and I agree. And I think city projects need to be in it too. This was the conversation. And I think we're not seeing any city projects go through it. We're only seeing developers with 1 or 2 houses or something like that. None of the big, like the Taluses and the Highlands and the Raleigh properties, those aren't going through it because they're under a different track. But somehow we need to capture
every project.
Alex and Tom.
Is it possible to get like a memo update or even a link to, like, we provided so much comment on what we'd like to see in that? Has progress been made so far, or is it going to be made before the August meeting so that we can kind of get just a quick look to see if progress is being made on it before it's presented to us in August?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. We could ask for maybe a written update in July so that you all have that kind of a month ahead of the conversation or earlier.
Yeah, well, this kind of follows with what Nancy already said, but just in terms of applying general principles of continuous process improvement, plan, do, check, act. Well, so here's this one thing, this environmental checklist, and yes, we need projects to go through that process in order to perform process improvement and learn and improve. I don't know. I guess I don't have a real good view as to what the city of Issaquah's overall approach to process improvement is. I mean, this is an example of an area where it can be applied to refine and improve a particular aspect of the process. I don't know. Does the city have a departmental person who is in charge of process improvement in general? Is that something that exists?
I would say it's a good question. Not formally, but there is kind of processes in place for project planning and checking on status and revisiting and adapting. Those processes are in place across the departments, but we don't have someone that's kind of evaluating that across the department or across, sorry, the whole city. Yeah.
Because you could ask that same question about every board or whatever. We have a board and we touched various work products that other departments are responsible for, and what has been the result of that, and evaluate that in terms of process improvement criteria. Something that could be done kind of systematically as a measure how well we're doing and what the end result is. That's outside of the scope of what we can do. So we can ask for that to be done. It's not in our charter to evaluate ourselves. Anyway, my comment is just about, applying principles of continuous process improvement is an area that I think the city in general could do more of. And so as to our particular little efforts.
Yeah, just one quick comment on, I agree, Nancy, on the checklist. I feel like we've been putting lipstick on a pig year after year, and maybe we need to question whether the pig, we're starting with the right core material of a pig for the non. So I think getting to like first principles on like, what are the goals of this document and what should it be doing? And then figuring out, working back from that point rather than forward from what we have currently is the direction I suggest.
And I think another piece of that I would be asking for when this is coming to us, so you can get, what projects have been approved in planning and community development this year? And which ones of them went through the checklist? And why didn't the ones that didn't go through the checklist go through it? So what did we miss along the way, so that if we want to check the environmental impact or environmental benefits of any of these projects, why did those not go through the process? Because we may have missed something. They're implementing, we're just here to give them a tool.
Well, I think unless there's any other comments, probably move on to our reports. Appreciate all the conversation on all of these topics and for everyone's patience on working through the outcomes from the retreat. So next up, we are into reports.
Yeah, just some brief council updates and a few items specific to the board. Last council meeting, the students did provide public comment at council requesting a letter of support from council to ISD for development of a sustainability policy. Council supported providing that letter, so we're currently drafting that. Council also heard from Recology around progress, service issues, implementation of their zero waste specialist in Issaquah on the work that she's doing. And then they also heard an update on Title 16, the state building code. The city did adopt that code. We are hoping to have our building inspector come and speak to the board at some point this summer about the climate and environmental benefits of that code. So that is on tentative schedule for the board to learn more about that in Title 16. Coming up next week on consent agenda is the PSC Up and Go program. This is to support electric vehicle charging at our public works facility and to approve that agreement. It's basically a shared program. PSC covers actually a lot of the costs with the model that we're going for to install 8 chargers over at Public Works. So a really important initiative as we start to acquire vehicles in our fleet. Also on the consent agenda is the climate planning grant from Department of.
Stacey, quick question.
Yes.
Do they know which public works area those will be?
Yeah, we have a draft design. So yeah, over at our main Public Works. I think I also mentioned at our last meeting that we received a grant from Department of Commerce for climate planning. This is coming out of the Climate Commitment Act funds. It's supporting a ton of work within the ICAP to bring on some additional capacity and move forward a few initiatives, as well as existing initiatives. It will also be helping the early support for updating the climate action plan later in 2025. So we're excited to get that grant in place and bring on some additional support. Next week, they'll also be hearing about the light rail plan. I have not reviewed the materials around that, but I'm happy to take a look at them and send them to the board. But I think an update on that planning process is scheduled for discussion next week. Upcoming on council in April is legislative summary, and then Lake Sammamish Park updates will be shared as well. Alex, you may have more information on that, or maybe a great opportunity to hear from her there. Other just quick updates. Just move into. So environmental board recruitment closed on Thursday along with the other boards and commissions. So we have been proceeding through interviews. Great pool of applicants that came through. So excited about that process. Recommendations from the mayor to council will happen in April with approval by mid-April, and new appointments starting at our May meeting. Sustainability fair is coming up in 2 weeks. We have a lot of really exciting programming this year. Some really interactive projects that the students are hosting. We have Evergreen will be there with electric vehicles, some great food vendors. We're doing a market preview with a number of new farmers market vendors. So please spread the word. March 30th, Dixie will be there. I'm sure others may be there with the other programs they support. We're looking for some more volunteers. If any of you are interested or know of folks that might be interested in volunteering, Nick is helping coordinate that. We can pass along information. I mentioned our solid waste analyst. She starts next week, so she will become the point person for the ecology contract. She'll be working on taking over the waste initiatives with the schools that I've been helping with, working really closely with the ecology zero waste person. So really excited to have one person with that focus as opposed to having the work spread across multiple staff. So it'll be great to get her in front of you all when she's got her feet under her a bit and hear about the work she's been doing. We also received a grant from Department of Commerce for electric vehicle charging for some of our fleet. I think I mentioned this very quickly at the last meeting. This is also through the Climate Commitment Act. We have heard positive news about some additional public sites that we had also submitted being funded this summer. So we're just waiting on those on that news. Those funds would come from Department of Commerce as well as WSDOT. And then we just kicked off conversations with PSE about a pole charging program for electric vehicles. They've selected Issaquah as one of their pilots or first cohort to go through this. So this is electric vehicle chargers that are installed on utility poles typically. They can be done on streetlights as well. Seattle City Light has been putting these in some neighborhoods in Seattle. So we'll be working with PSE and doing a lot of community engagement over the next year to identify those sites. They're looking at 2 to 4 chargers in the next year, but likely more chargers. That great opportunity for folks that live in multifamily or maybe don't have to charge in. To have a place for charging. See, and then just last update, we are still continuing to work with PSE on the community solar program at the community center. We are anticipating having lease agreement and easement as well as design ready in the next month or 2 to go to council. That's a solar project that community members would subscribe to, and it would be community center. We're also looking at some educational materials to put in the center because folks can't access the roof easily. So we want to make sure they can still interact and be educated. And then upcoming topics for environmental board. Next month will be comprehensive plan. We're working to get you those materials early. We are still sorting through all of the board feedback on goals, policies, and the narrative, working on those revisions. We've also been receiving feedback from the state and Puget Sound Regional Council, working on incorporating that feedback into both the environment policy as well, or excuse me, element as well as the other elements. So we are planning to bring you kind of a final draft environment element along with goals and policies from the other elements that are most related to our work. And we'll be working to bring, as I mentioned, those materials to you a little bit earlier so you have time for review ahead of the April meeting. Those are the main updates. Any questions?
Unless anyone has any other business.
That's a lot of really exciting stuff, Stacy.
We're very fortunate of a lot of funding coming out of the state right now. So, and great partnerships with PSE. So we are trying to jump on all those opportunities while they're available.
All right, well, I think we are adjourned then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, and Stacy, I would love to be at the sustainability fair, but I will be in Baja.
No, yeah, you gotta figure out those priorities.